Hello, everyone. Today, I'm diving into a story I've titled The Blocked Stream, A Tale of Nature's Revenge. It's about a quiet man who builds a perfect drainage system, only to face the wrath of an overzealous HOA president who thinks she can control everything, even nature. Her reckless sabotage floods her own community's prized fountain, turning it into a stinking disaster, all while the truth unravels through videos, arguments, and storms. This is a story of patience, evidence, and how water always finds its way. So settle in, because we're about to get swept into a tale where pride meets consequence, and nature gets the last laugh. The rain was pounding my roof like a drumroll, each drop a reminder that the storm wasn't here to play nice. I was nursing a coffee on my porch, watching the water sluice through the gravel-lined trench I'd built years ago, when I saw her, Olivia Crane, the self-appointed queen of Willow Crest Estates, marching toward my gate. She held a soggy envelope aloft like it was the Ten Commandments, her face twisted into a smirk that said she'd already won. I didn't know what was in that envelope, but I knew it wasn't a thank you note. Olivia had been circling my property like a vulture for months, ever since she clawed her way to HOA president. My land, just outside her precious subdivision, was her personal obsession, a stubborn patch of freedom she couldn't regulate. "Mr. Harlan," she called, her voice cutting through the rain like a bad radio signal. "You're in violation of HOA Code subsection B4-12. Failure to maintain approved landscaping standards." She thrust the envelope at me, water dripping from her perfectly manicured nails. I took it, mostly to get her off my porch, and glanced at the paper inside. It was a fine, $200 for unsightly drainage features and non-compliant fencing. I almost laughed. My trench, a marvel of amateur engineering, had kept my yard flood-free for a decade. And my fence? Just a low wooden barrier to keep her nosy board members from wandering onto my property. But the kicker? I wasn't even in her HOA. Never signed a contract, never attended a meeting, never gave a dime to her little empire. "Olivia," I said, keeping my voice steady, "my land's not under your jurisdiction. You know that." Her eyes narrowed, and for a second, I thought she'd stomp her foot like a toddler. Instead, she flicked her wrist, dismissing me. "The community's aesthetic is everyone's responsibility," she snapped. "Your ditch is an eyesore, and it's causing runoff issues. Fix it, or the fines will keep coming." She turned on her heel, her raincoat flapping like a cape, and stormed back toward the glowing lights of Willow Crest. I stood there, the envelope wilting in my hand, wondering if I should frame it as a joke or burn it as kindling. Here's the thing. Olivia wasn't just annoying, she was dangerous. 3 days earlier, I'd caught her snooping near my trench with a contractor, pointing at the pipes opening like it was a crime scene. My neighbor, Tom, a retired mechanic who liked to keep tabs on the neighborhood, told me she'd been bragging at the last HOA meeting about restoring harmony to the boundary line. I didn't think much of it then. Olivia was all talk, always waving her laminated HOA badge like it gave her diplomatic immunity. But that night, as the rain kept falling, I felt a prickle of unease. My trench was more than a ditch. It was a system, carefully designed to channel rainwater from my roof, through an underground pipe, and into a shallow basin where it soaked into the soil. It wasn't pretty, but it worked. And if Olivia was targeting it, she was playing with forces she didn't understand. By midnight, the storm had turned my driveway into a shallow stream, but the trench held firm, guiding the water exactly where it needed to go. I went to bed thinking I'd deal with Olivia's nonsense in the morning. But when I woke up, the world had shifted. My front yard was a lake, water pooling where the trench should have drained. I grabbed a flashlight and slogged out to check the pipe's entrance. There, under a thin layer of mud, was a slab of fresh cement, sealing the opening shut. A sticky note was taped to the fence post, Olivia's handwriting unmistakable, compliance achieved. "You're welcome." I stared at it, my pulse ticking up. She hadn't just sent a fine, she'd sabotaged my property. And as I looked across the fence toward Willow Crest, I saw their community fountain, their pride and joy, glinting under the morning sun. It was still pristine, its water clear and sparkling. But I knew something Olivia didn't. Water doesn't stop. It redirects. And her little cement stunt was about to turn her perfect fountain into a very public disaster. Standing in the mud, staring at Olivia's smug note, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't in years, rage, sharp and hot, like a spark in dry grass. But as I looked at the cement clogging my drain, I forced myself to breathe. This wasn't the first time someone had tried to mess with my land, and I learned long ago that anger clouds judgment. I trudged back to my porch, the rain now a soft drizzle, and let my mind drift to the quieter days before Willowcrest and its HOA turned my life into a suburban soap opera. Those memories weren't just nostalgia, they were a reminder of why I'd built my trench, why I'd stayed outside their rules, and why I wouldn't let Olivia win. 10 years ago, I bought this plot when it was just a grassy acre surrounded by oaks and wildflowers. The developers hadn't yet carved up the land into cookie-cutter lots with manicured lawns. I was 32, fresh off a divorce, and wanted a place to rebuild, literally and figuratively. I wasn't an engineer, just a guy who liked solving problems. My dad, a plumber with a knack for practical fixes, taught me to respect water's power. It's patient, he'd say, and it'll outlast anything you build if you don't plan right. So when I moved here, I studied the land's slope, the soil, the seasonal rains. I dug the trench by hand, laid the pipe, and tested it through 3 monsoons. It was my first big project, and every time it rained, I'd watch the water flow like it was a symphony I'd composed. Back then, the neighbors were different, mostly farmers or retirees who minded their own business. We'd trade tomatoes or swap stories over beers. When Willowcrest started construction, they came knocking, offering me cash to sell or join their HOA. Their pitch was all about community value, but I saw the fine print. Rules about paint colors, lawn heights, even what flowers I could plant. I politely declined, and they built their subdivision anyway, their houses creeping right up to my fence. For years, we coexisted. I kept my land green, they kept their fountain sparkling, and nobody bothered anybody. Until Olivia. She wasn't the first HOA president, but she was the loudest. I'd heard stories from Tom about her predecessor, a guy named Carl who mostly rubber-stamped budgets and left people alone. Olivia, though, treated the HOA like her personal kingdom. I'd seen her at the grocery store once, berating a cashier over a coupon, her voice carrying like she wanted an audience. That was 6 months ago, right after she took over. Since then, she'd sent me letters about my mailbox too rustic, my oak tree too leafy, and now my trench too existent. Each time, I'd respond with a copy of my property deed, highlighting the part that said I wasn't in her HOA. Each time, she'd ignore it. What bugged me most wasn't her persistence, it was her certainty. Olivia didn't just want control. She believed she was saving the neighborhood from people like me, people who didn't conform to her vision of suburban perfection. I tried reasoning with her once, inviting her over to explain the trench's purpose. I'd even drawn a diagram, showing how it diverted water away from her precious subdivision. She'd stood in my yard, arms crossed, and said, "It looks like a scar on the landscape." That was when I knew she wasn't interested in facts. She wanted obedience. Now, with my trench sealed, I felt that old spark of defiance flare again. I could have called the cops or grabbed a sledgehammer, but I learned from my dad that water fights its own battles if you give it time. The cement was a problem, sure, but Olivia's note was a confession. I peeled it off the post, tucked it into my pocket, and went inside to check my weather app. Heavy rains were forecast for the weekend. If Olivia thought she'd won, she was about to learn what happens when you block a stream. I just had to wait. The morning after Olivia's cement stunt, I woke to the sound of birds, not rain, which felt like a small mercy. My yard was still a swamp, but the sun was out, casting long shadows across the mess. I grabbed a shovel and started poking around the sealed pipe, not to break it open, just to assess the damage. The cement was quick-set, hard as a rock, and poured deep enough that I'd need more than elbow grease to fix it. I wasn't mad anymore, just focused. Olivia had crossed a line, and I needed to understand her game before I made my next move. Olivia Crane wasn't a mystery, but she was a puzzle. I pieced together bits of her story from Tom and other neighbors over the past few months. She'd moved to Willowcrest 2 years ago, a corporate lawyer who'd traded city life for the suburbs after a messy divorce. She was in her late 40s, sharp as a tack, and carried herself like someone used to winning. Tom said she'd run for HOA president unopposed, charming the board with promises of elevating property values and unifying the community. But once she got the gavel, the charm faded. She started fining people for minor infractions, wrong-colored curtains, unapproved birdhouses, even a kid's lemonade stand that didn't have a permit. She'd patrol the streets with a clipboard, her heels clicking like a metronome, and nobody dared challenge her. Nobody, that is, until me. What made Olivia tick wasn't just power, it was validation. I'd seen it in her eyes when she handed me that fine, the way she stood a little taller, like she was proving something to herself. I wasn't just a neighbor to her. I was a symbol of everything she couldn't control. My land, my trench, my refusal to bow, they were personal insults. I'd overheard her at a community picnic, talking to a board member about that recluse on the hill who was dragging down the neighborhood's image. I wasn't a recluse, just private. But to Olivia, anyone who didn't play her game was a threat. That afternoon, I walked to Tom's place to get his take on the cement incident. He was in his garage, tinkering with an old radio, his dog sprawled at his feet. "She's lost it," he said when I showed him Olivia's note. "I saw her with those workers yesterday. Told him it was your property, but she waved that damn badge and said it was HOA business. I should have called you." I shrugged. Tom wasn't the confrontational type, and I didn't blame him. But he had something else, a photo he'd snapped of Olivia directing the workers, her face lit up with triumph. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Back home, I checked the camera I'd installed last year after some kids kept sneaking into my orchard. It faced the trench, and sure enough, it had caught the whole thing. Olivia, 2 workers, a wheelbarrow of cement, and her pointing like a general on a battlefield. The footage was grainy but clear enough to show her badge and that note being taped to the post. I saved it to a folder labeled Olivia's Folly and felt a twinge of satisfaction. Evidence was my ally, and I'd need more before this was over. By evening, I noticed something odd. The air smelled faintly sour, like wet compost. I followed my nose to the fence line and saw water pooling on the HOA side, near their fountain's pump shed. The fountain itself was still running, its jets dancing under colored lights, but the ground around it was soggy. My trench used to siphon off excess runoff from their low-lying land. Without it, the water was finding new paths, and not good ones. I didn't smile, but I didn't frown either. Olivia had started this war, and the battlefield was already shifting. The next day, I decided to take a walk, not to clear my head, but to scope out the enemy's territory. Willow Crest was a maze of identical houses, each with a neatly trimmed lawn and a mailbox that screamed, "Olivia approved." I wasn't looking for trouble, just context, something to explain why she'd escalated from letters to vandalism. As I passed the community fountain, I noticed a new addition, a garish flagpole with an HOA crest, flapping in the breeze. It was planted right against my fence, so close the pole's shadow fell across my trench. A coincidence? Not likely. Olivia didn't do subtle. I stopped to take a closer look, and that's when I saw Mrs. Delaney, a widow who lived 2 houses down from the fountain. She was watering her roses, her face pinched like she'd bitten a lemon. "That thing's an eyesore," she muttered, nodding at the flagpole. "Olivia said it's for community pride, but it's just her ego on a stick." I chuckled, and she lowered her voice. "She's been after your fence, too. Says it's not uniform with ours. Watch your back." I thanked her and kept walking, but her words stuck. The flagpole wasn't just a decoration, it was a marker, a line in the sand. When I got home, I found another envelope in my mailbox, this time with a photo of my fence and a circled note, non-compliant height and material. Correct within 7 days or face legal action. Legal action? I almost admired her audacity. My fence was cedar, 4 feet high, built to keep deer out, not to win a beauty contest. But to Olivia, it was another rebellion she couldn't stomach. I filed the letter with the others, my collection growing like a scrapbook of her obsession. That evening, I sat in my workshop, sketching the trench's layout to figure out a temporary fix. The cement was a problem, but the bigger issue was the runoff now pooling in my yard and seeping toward Willow Crest. I wasn't worried about my land. I'd built it to handle floods, but their fountain was at risk, sitting in a natural basin. I could have warned them, but Olivia's note was still in my pocket, her "you're welcome" mocking me. Let her learn the hard way, I thought, then hated myself for it. I wasn't cruel, just tired. Tired of her rules, her badge, her certainty that she could bend the world to her will. The next morning, I spotted a group of HOA board members near the flagpole, Olivia at the center, gesturing wildly. I grabbed my binoculars, yes, I'm that guy, and watched her point at my fence, then my trench. One board member, a nervous-looking guy named Greg, kept shaking his head, but Olivia talked over him. I couldn't hear them, but I didn't need to. She was planning her next move, and I was the target. I went back to my workshop, fired up my laptop, and started digging into the HOA's bylaws, public records, anything that might give me leverage. I found a gem, the subdivision's original flood plan, which marked my trench as a critical drainage feature. Olivia hadn't just broken my pipe, she'd violated city code. By noon, the sour smell from the fountain was stronger, and I saw maintenance workers poking around the pump shed, looking confused. A small crowd had gathered, whispering and pointing. Olivia wasn't there, but her flagpole loomed over the scene like a bad omen. I didn't know it yet, but the first cracks in her empire were forming, and the water was only getting started. I spent the next day in my yard, not digging or fighting, but thinking. The trench wasn't just a ditch to me, it was a piece of who I was. I'd poured months into designing it, reading books on hydrology, watching YouTube tutorials, even calling my dad for advice. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine, and it worked. The pipe ran from my roof's gutters, under the lawn, to a perforated section that fed the basin. The basin, lined with gravel and native grasses, let the water seep slowly into the soil, preventing erosion and floods. It was simple, efficient, and, until Olivia, invisible to everyone but me. I walked the trench's path, tracing its curves with my eyes. The cement plug was like a scar, ugly and deliberate. I could have hired a contractor to break it out, but that would have cost hundreds, and I wasn't ready to escalate. Not yet. Instead, I grabbed a notebook and started mapping the new water flow. Without the pipe, rainwater was pooling in my yard, then spilling over the fence into Willow Crest low ground. The fountain's pump shed was the lowest point, and if the smell was any clue, it was already taking on water it wasn't built for. I sketched the slope, the fence line, the shed, and felt a pang of guilt. I didn't want to hurt the neighborhood, just Olivia. That afternoon, Tom stopped by with a six-pack and a story. He'd overheard Olivia at the coffee shop, telling a friend she'd neutralized my trench to protect property values. She'd even laughed about it, saying I'd come begging for her help when my yard flooded. Tom shook his head. She's got no idea what she's done, does she? I didn't answer, just cracked a beer and handed him one. Tom was a good guy, but he was also a gossip, and I knew he'd spread the word. Sure enough, by evening, my phone buzzed with texts from neighbors I barely knew, asking if it was true that Olivia had cemented my drain. I didn't confirm or deny, just let the rumor grow. The guilt came back that night, stronger this time. I sat on my porch, staring at the dark shape of Willow Crest Fountain. I thought about the kids who played there, the families who saw it as their community's heart. Olivia was the problem, not them. I drafted an email to the HOA board, explaining the trench's purpose and the cement's consequences, attaching the flood plan I'd found. I kept it polite, professional, hoping someone, anyone, would listen. I hit send, then went to bed, knowing Olivia would probably delete it unread. The next morning, I found a reply, not from Olivia but from Greg, the nervous board member. "Thanks for the info," he wrote. "I'll bring it up at the next meeting. Please don't escalate." It was vague, but it was something. I saved the email, added it to my growing folder, and checked my camera. The footage showed water creeping closer to the pump shed, the ground turning to muck. The fountain's jets were still running, but the water looked cloudy, like it was hiding something ugly. I didn't know how long it would take, but the system I'd built was gone, and the water was writing its own story now. The weekend brought the promised storm, a beast of a rain that turned the sky to slate and shook my windows with thunder. I didn't sleep much, not because I was worried about my yard. My house was on a slight rise, safe from flooding, but because I couldn't stop thinking about Olivia's arrogance. That note, "Compliance achieved. You're welcome," was taped to my fridge now, a reminder of her smug certainty. She hadn't just broken my trench, she'd declared war on reason, on nature, on me. And as the rain hammered down, I knew her victory lap was about to get very wet. I checked the trench at dawn, wading through ankle-deep water. The cement held firm, but the basin was overflowing, sending a steady stream toward Willow Crest. I followed the flow to the fence, where it poured through a gap and down the slope to the pump shed. The fountain was still running, but its lights were flickering, and the water had a greenish tint. I didn't need to be a chemist to know something was wrong. The shed housed the fountain's filtration system, and if it was flooding, it was pulling in mud, debris, maybe worse. I thought about knocking on Olivia's door, giving her one last chance to fix it, but the memory of her smirk stopped me. She'd made her choice. By noon, the neighborhood was buzzing. I saw cars pulling into the HOA clubhouse, people running through the rain with umbrellas. Tom texted me, "Fountain's gone weird. Olivia's blaming you." I wasn't surprised. I pulled up my camera footage and watched the night's events. Water cascading over the fence, pooling around the shed, seeping under the door. The fountain's jet slowed, then sputtered, like a car running out of gas. I saved the clip and uploaded it to a private folder, just in case. Then I got a call from Mrs. Delaney. "It smells like a sewer over here," she said, her voice shaky. "They're saying the fountain's contaminated. Is this because of your drain?" I told her the truth. Olivia had blocked it, and now the runoff had nowhere to go. She was quiet for a moment, then said, "That woman's going to ruin us all." I spent the afternoon reinforcing my yard, digging a temporary channel to divert some of the water to a dry corner of my land. It wasn't a fix, just a bandage, but it gave me something to do. As I worked, I thought about Olivia's mindset. She wasn't stupid. She was a lawyer, after all, but she was blind to anything that didn't fit her narrative. To her, my trench was a defiance of her authority, not a functional system. She'd rather risk a disaster than admit she was wrong. That kind of pride wasn't just dangerous. It was contagious, infecting the board, the maintenance crew, anyone who didn't push back. By evening, the rain had eased, but the damage was done. I walked to the fence and saw a crowd around the fountain, their voices sharp with anger. Olivia was there, holding a megaphone, insisting it was a temporary issue caused by external factors. I caught Greg's eye, and he looked away, like he was ashamed to be seen with her. The fountain's water was now a murky brown, bubbling like a witch's brew. I didn't stay long, just long enough to know that Olivia's war was backfiring, and the battle was far from over. The storm left a quiet chaos in its wake, the kind that hums under the surface before it explodes. My yard was a mess, but I'd managed to keep the water from reaching my house. Willow Crest wasn't so lucky. By Monday morning, the fountain was cordoned off with caution tape, its jets silent, the water a sickly green that shimmered under the sun. The smell was worse now, a mix of rot and chemicals, and it clung to the air like a bad memory. I stood at my fence, sipping coffee, watching maintenance workers in gloves poke at the pump shed with grim faces. They didn't know I was the key to this disaster, or that Olivia had handed me the match. I wasn't gloating, not really. I felt a strange mix of vindication and unease. The fountain was the heart of Willow Crest, a place where kids splashed and couples took selfies. Now it was a health hazard, and I knew why. My trench had been diverting runoff from their land for years, easing the strain on their outdated drainage system. Olivia's cement had broken that balance, sending water, and whatever it carried, straight into the fountain's pumps. I could have fixed it, maybe, but I wasn't about to volunteer. Not after her stunt. Still, I wondered about the kids, the families, the people who'd done nothing wrong. Was I letting Olivia's war hurt them too? That afternoon, I got a visit from Greg, the board member. He looked like he hadn't slept, his tie loose, his eyes darting. "Can we talk?" he asked, glancing over his shoulder like Olivia might be watching. I invited him in, offered him a soda, and waited. He sat at my kitchen table, fidgeting, then spilled it. "Olivia's out of control. She's saying you sabotaged the fountain, but I saw your email. The flood plan. Is it true she blocked your drain?" I nodded, showed him the camera footage, the note, Tom's photo. His face went pale. "This is bad," he muttered. "The board didn't know? She said it was routine maintenance." I leaned back, letting him process. Greg wasn't my friend, but he was scared, and scared people talk. He told me the fountain's pumps were clogged with sludge, and the water tested positive for bacteria. The HOA was facing fines, maybe lawsuits, and Olivia was doubling down, blaming negligent neighbors. Greg wanted my help, but I wasn't ready to play savior. "Tell the board to check the city's flood records," I said, "and maybe ask Olivia why she's lying." He left, promising to dig deeper, but I didn't trust him to stand up to her. Not yet. By evening, the neighborhood was a tinderbox. I saw posts on the community app, angry rants about the fountain, demands for answers, even a meme of Olivia as a cartoon villain. I didn't join in, but I read every word, saving screenshots of anything that mentioned the trench. Tom called, laughing. "They're calling it the swamp fountain now. Olivia's losing it." I checked my camera again and saw something new, water seeping from the shed's foundation, spreading toward the clubhouse. The storm was over, but the consequences were just beginning, and I had a feeling the next rain would make this look like a warm-up. The fountain's stench had become Willow Crest's unwelcome mascot, a sour cloud that followed you from mailbox to driveway. By Wednesday, the neighborhood was a cauldron of whispers and side-eyes, and I was right in the middle, not by choice but by circumstance. My phone pinged with messages from strangers, some asking if I'd poisoned the water, others begging for details about Olivia's cement stunt. I kept my replies vague. Check the community app. I wasn't here to fan flames, but I wasn't dousing them either. The truth was out there, clawing its way through the muck, and I was content to let it crawl. At the hardware store, picking up sandbags to shore up my yard, I ran into Jake, a barista who lived 3 streets over. He leaned across the counter, his voice low. "Yo, Harlan, you're famous. They're calling you the Swamp King online." I snorted, grabbing my receipt. "Not my style. Olivia's the one who loves a crown." He grinned, then sobered. "My sister's kid got a rash from that fountain. People are pissed. She's saying it's your fault." I nodded, unsurprised. Olivia's playbook was predictable: deflect, accuse, repeat. But Jake's words stuck. Kids were getting sick, and that wasn't a game. I bought extra sandbags, my gut twisting with a mix of anger and guilt. I hadn't blocked the fountain, but I hadn't stopped her either. Back home, I found a neon green flyer on my gate. Urgent HOA meeting, fountain crisis resolution. It was Friday at the clubhouse, and the word mandatory was underlined twice. I wasn't bound by their rules, but I'd go. Not to fight, just to listen. Olivia would spin her story, and I needed to know her next move. I checked my camera, now a daily ritual. The footage showed neighbors sneaking photos of the fountain, its water a murky soup, and a maintenance worker gagging as he scooped out debris. I saved the clip, added it to my growing archive, and noticed something new: a crack in the fountain's basin, barely visible but growing. Water finds the weak spots, always. That evening, I walked to Mrs. Delaney's house, needing a friendly face. She was pruning her roses, her hands steady despite the chaos. "They're turning on her," she said, snipping a dead bloom. "But some still believe her lies. She's got a knack for twisting things." I showed her the flyer, and her eyes narrowed. "She'll try to pin it on you. Be ready." I told her about the camera, the flood plan, my email to the board. She patted my arm. "You're smarter than she thinks. Keep it that way." Her faith steadied me, but doubt crept in. What if the neighborhood turned on me before Olivia fell? I was the outsider, the easy target. I called Sarah, my paralegal friend, and sent her the latest footage. "This is escalating," she said, her voice sharp. "The health angle changes everything. Document every interaction." I promised I would, but as I hung up, I felt the weight of it all: the trench, the fountain, the neighbors' kids. I wasn't a hero, just a guy who wanted his drain back. But the sour smell drifting over the fence told me this was bigger than me now. The meeting loomed, and I knew it'd be a battlefield. I just didn't know whose side the crowd would take. The clubhouse was a pressure cooker Friday night, packed with sweating, muttering neighbors under flickering lights. I slipped in through a side door, my folder clutched like a shield. Olivia stood at the front, her hair perfect, her smile a brittle mask. She held a microphone, launching into a speech about unforeseen environmental challenges and community unity. It was polished nonsense, but some nodded, desperate for reassurance. I stayed in the shadows, watching her dodge the real issue: the cement in my trench. A mother named Clara stood, her voice trembling. "My son's in the hospital with a bacterial infection. You said the fountain was fine." The room stirred, murmurs turning to shouts. Olivia raised a hand, promising an independent investigation, but her eyes darted to the exit. Then Tom, bless him, stood up. "What about Harlan's drain? I saw you cement it shut." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Olivia's smile froze, then she laughed, a sharp, nervous sound. "That was routine maintenance, approved by the board." It was a lie, and I saw Greg, the board member, shift uncomfortably in his seat. I hadn't planned to speak, but Mrs. Delaney caught my eye, nodding fiercely. I stepped forward, heart pounding, and held up my phone. "I've got footage," I said, my voice steady despite the stares. Olivia and her crew, pouring cement, taping a note to my fence. "It's on the app now." The room exploded, people pulling out phones, scrolling, shouting. Olivia's face went white, but she recovered, accusing me of fabricating evidence to sabotage the HOA. It was a desperate swing, and it missed. Greg stood, his hands shaking. "I saw Harlan's email warning us." "You ignored it, Olivia." He held up a printed copy, and the crowd roared louder. Clara, the mother, pushed to the front, playing my video on her phone for all to see. Olivia's smirk, the cement, the note. "You did this," she screamed. Olivia tried to speak, but the microphone squealed, drowning her out. The meeting dissolved into chaos, neighbors arguing, board members fleeing, kids crying. I slipped out, my folder untouched but my point made. Back home, I checked the app. The video had 3,000 views, with comments calling Olivia everything from liar to tyrant. I didn't add fuel, just let it burn. Sarah called, thrilled. "The city's sending a health inspector Monday." Your footage sealed it. I nodded, staring at the fountain through my window. Its crack was wider now, water seeping into the soil. Olivia's lies were crumbling, but she wasn't done. I could feel it, like a storm gathering strength. I added a second camera, angled at the pump shed, and went to bed, the sound of rain in my dreams. The truth was out, but truths don't win wars alone. I needed to be ready for her counterattack. The meeting's aftermath was a wildfire, scorching Olivia's reputation overnight. By Saturday, the community app was a battlefield, posts about hospital visits, demands for Olivia's resignation, even a petition to audit the HOA's finances. I stayed offline, but I saved every screenshot, building my case like a fortress. Olivia hadn't responded publicly, her silence louder than her speeches. I knew she was regrouping, and people like her don't retreat. They reload. I met Sarah at a coffee shop to strategize. She spread my documents across the table, her eyes gleaming. This is a slam dunk, she said. Trespassing, property damage, health violations. We need a lawyer. She'd already contacted Ellen, a property law expert who'd handled HOA disputes. I sent Ellen my folder, footage, letters, the flood plan, Tom's photo, Greg's email. She called an hour later, her voice calm but fierce. Olivia's in over her head. I'm drafting a demand letter. Remove the cement, pay for damages, or we sue. I agreed, but my stomach churned. I wanted justice, not a spectacle. Still, Olivia had left me no choice. That afternoon, Tom hosted a neighbor meetup, a tense huddle in his backyard. Clara was there, her anger now a quiet fire. My son's home, but he's scared to swim anywhere, she said. Mrs. Delaney passed out lemonade, her voice sharp. Olivia's been fleecing us for years, fines, fees, no accountability. Greg showed up, looking haunted, and handed me a flash drive. Board emails, he whispered. She planned to frame you for vandalism. I plugged it in later, and my jaw dropped. Olivia had written, Harlan's a liability. We'll say he tampered with the fountain. It was bold, stupid, and damning. The meetup turned into a war council. Clara wanted to protest at Olivia's house, but I cautioned against it. Let the city handle her, I said. We've got proof. They agreed, reluctantly, and I promised to share more footage if needed. As I left, Clara hugged me, her eyes wet. Thank you for fighting. I mumbled something awkward, unprepared for gratitude. Back home, I saw the fountain's caution tape flapping in the wind, the crack now a jagged scar. Someone had taped a sign, Olivia's legacy. I didn't laugh, it hit too close. Ellen's letter went out Monday, and by evening, Olivia responded with a cease and desist, accusing me of cyberbullying and defamation. Ellen laughed when I showed her. She's panicking. We've got her. We sent a counter letter, attaching the board emails and Carla's upcoming report. The fountain smell was now a neighborhood plague, and parents were pulling kids from summer camps, fearing contamination. I lay awake, wondering if I'd pushed too far. But the emails, the footage, the crack, they told a story Olivia couldn't rewrite. The city was coming, and so was the next storm. Monday's sunrise was blood red, a warning of the heat and trouble ahead. The city's health inspector, Carla, arrived at 10 a.m., her face all business. I walked her to the trench, showed her the cement, the basin, the flood plan. She scribbled notes, took photos, then waded to the fountain, now a toxic puddle. This is a public health nightmare, she said, pulling a water sample. Blocking a registered drain caused this. Who authorized it? I handed her the footage, Tom's photo, Olivia's note. She didn't smile, just said, this'll be in my report. I felt a spark of hope, but also dread. Reports don't fix rashes or broken trust. Ellen met me at her office, a cluttered space with law books and coffee stains. She'd reviewed the board emails and was livid. Olivia's not just negligent, she's malicious. Framing you? That's criminal. She'd added conspiracy to her lawsuit draft, alongside trespassing and endangerment. We're not just after the HOA, she said. We're naming her personally. I swallowed hard, picturing Olivia's face at the meeting, her fear. I didn't want her life ruined, just her power. But Ellen was right. The kids, the fountain, the lies demanded accountability. Back home, I found a crowd at the fountain, not gawking but protesting. Clara led them, holding a sign, clean water, clean leadership. News vans parked nearby, reporters interviewing parents. I stayed back, but a reporter spotted me. Are you Harlan? The drain guy. I nodded, wary. Can you comment on the HOA's actions? I kept it short. They blocked a critical drain. The city's investigating. She pressed for more, but I walked away. Fame wasn't my goal, fixing my trench was. That evening, Greg called, his voice low. Olivia's trying to settle quietly, offering to pay for fountain repairs if we drop the petition. I wasn't shocked, she'd always been a deal-maker. Don't take it, I said. She'll just start over. He agreed, but I heard doubt in his voice. Olivia's charm still had claws. I checked my new camera, catching workers draining the fountain again, the water now black with sludge. The crack had spread, threatening the foundation. I sent the clip to Ellen, who replied, "This is our ace. Keep it coming." I sat on my porch, the air heavy with rot. The protest, the lawsuit, the footage, it was all closing in on Olivia, but I felt no joy. I'd wanted peace, not war. Yet the trench, the water, the truth, they were my allies, and they were relentless. Carla's report was due tomorrow, and with it, the city's verdict. I didn't know what Olivia would do next, but I knew she was running out of moves. The second storm roared in Thursday night, a monster of wind and water that shook my house like a toy. I'd prepped my yard, sandbags, tarps, a deeper temporary channel, but the trench's absence was a wound, bleeding water across my land. I stayed up, flashlight in hand, watching the basin overflow. The fence gap was a torrent now, sending a muddy river toward Willow Crest. I didn't want this, but Olivia had rolled the dice, and nature was collecting. At 3 a.m., I heard shouts over the thunder. I pulled on a raincoat and slogged to the fence. The fountain was a cauldron, frothing with debris, a soccer ball, leaves, something unidentifiable. The pump shed was underwater, its door banging in the wind. 3 workers, drenched and cursing, tried to rig a pump, but the hose burst, spraying them with sludge. One saw me, his face twisted. "You happy now?" he yelled. I shook my head, rain stinging my eyes. "This is on Olivia." She knew. He didn't reply, just turned back to the chaos. I recorded it all, my camera's lens fogging but clear enough. By dawn, the storm had eased, but the fountain was a ruin, cracked, leaking, its water a black mire. The clubhouse lawn was a swamp, ruining a planned wedding reception. Neighbors gathered, some in tears, others filming for the news. Olivia's house was dark, her car gone. Tom texted, "She's at a hotel. Board's done with her." I checked my footage, the shed's electrical panel sparking, the fountain's foundation buckling. I sent it to Ellen, who replied, "This is catastrophic. City shutting it down." Carla's report hit that afternoon, emailed to the HOA and me. It was brutal. High E. coli levels, structural damage, $30,000 in estimated fines. The cement was cited as the primary cause, Olivia named as the instigator. Ellen called, her voice electric. "We're adding structural negligence to the suit." She's finished. But I felt hollow. The fountain wasn't just Olivia's, it was the community's, and it was gone. I walked the trench, the cement mocking me, and wondered if I could have stopped this sooner. Maybe warned them louder, fought harder. But doubt doesn't fix floods. A news crew showed up, filming the fountain's wreckage. Clara spotted me, waved me over. "You were right," she said, her voice soft. "We should have listened." I shrugged, uncomfortable with praise. The storm had spoken, and its voice was louder than mine. The town hall was tomorrow, and I knew it'd be Olivia's last stand. I just hoped the community could heal after she fell. The town hall was a spectacle, moved to the city center to handle the crowd. Reporters swarmed, health officials sat up front, and neighbors filled every seat, their anger a living thing. I took a spot in the back, my folder now a tome, Carla's report, Ellen's drafts, board emails, footage stills. Olivia entered, her suit immaculate but her face gaunt, like she'd aged a decade. She took the podium, starting with a rehearsed, "I take responsibility," but the crowd wasn't having it. A father stood, holding a doctor's note. "My daughter's sick because of you," he shouted. The room roared, and Olivia flinched, her hands gripping the podium. Clara went next, her voice like steel. She read Olivia's emails, exposing her plan to neutralize me. Gasps turned to boos. Greg followed, confessing he'd ignored my warnings, his voice breaking. "I'm sorry," he said, looking at me. I nodded, forgiving him silently. Then Carla stood, her report projected on a screen. Bacterial counts, structural risks, Olivia's name in bold. "This was preventable," she said. "One person's actions caused a crisis." The crowd surged, chanting, "Resign." Olivia tried to speak, but her mic cut out, a fitting metaphor. Ellen took the stage, announcing our lawsuit, trespassing, negligence, conspiracy. She handed Olivia the papers, the cameras flashing like lightning. Olivia's eyes met mine, not with anger but defeat. I didn't look away. The vote for a new president came fast. Clara was chosen, her name a rallying cry. She promised audits, repairs, no more secrets. Olivia slipped out a back door, her allies gone, her power dust. Outside, neighbors hugged, cried, planned. Tom found me, grinning. You did it, Harlan. I shook my head. We did. Back home, I felt a strange peace. The fountain was lost, but the community was waking up, seeing each other, not just rules. Kids left drawings on my gate, thanking me for saving the water. I kept them, not for pride but for hope. The trench was still broken, but the fight was shifting. Olivia was falling, and the neighborhood was rising. Olivia's house hit the market a week later. For sale sign leaning crooked in her yard, like it knew it didn't belong. No fanfare, no HOA welcome wagon, just a quiet retreat. Word was she'd rented an apartment across town, licking her wounds. I didn't care where she went. Her absence was a gift. The fountain was a ghost now, drained and roped off, a hazmat crew scrubbing its bones. The clubhouse was closed, its repairs eating the HOA's budget. Clara's first newsletter was blunt. Full disclosure, no more lies. I hired a contractor to remove the cement, a $1,000 hit the HOA promised to cover. Ellen's lawsuit settled fast, repairs, fees, a modest sum for distress. I used it to buy a rainwater tank, turning my trench into a model of sustainability. The city sent a planner to map it, ensuring no future HOA could touch it. Kids stopped by, sketching it for science fairs, their parents asking about floodproofing their yards. I shared what I knew, surprised at my own patience. The neighborhood softened. The flagpole was gone, replaced by a playground. Clara's board held open meetings, voted on every penny. People waved, brought jam, asked about my apples. I wasn't one of them, but I wasn't alone either. At a community picnic, Clara toasted new beginnings, her eyes on me. I raised a glass, feeling the weight of the fight lift. Olivia had wanted control, but she'd ignored the land, the people, the water. Her lesson was carved in the fountain's cracks. Power without purpose is a flood waiting to happen. I thought about her sometimes, wondered if she'd rebuild or just run again. She wasn't evil, just blind, chasing a perfect image that never existed. The trench taught her what it taught me. Water doesn't bend to ego. It flows, reshapes, endures. I walked my land, the air clean, the fight over. The community wasn't perfect, but it was honest, and that was enough. Fall arrived, and the trench sang again. Its water clear, its reeds dancing in the breeze. Frogs croaked, dragonflies skimmed the basin, and I walked its path daily, checking the flow like a ritual. The city installed a marker, a bronze plate calling it a vital drainage feature. I hung it in my shed, not for show but for memory. Willow Crest was alive, messy, loud, real. The playground bustled, the garden bloomed, and Clara's newsletters kept the HOA honest, every dollar accounted for. I stayed on the edges, but neighbors pulled me in. The new family in Olivia's house brought muffins, their daughter asking if the trench was magic. I laughed, showed her the pipes, explained gravity. She drew it for school, won a prize, and I framed her thank you note. People asked for gardening tips, flood advice, even invited me to poker nights. I went once, lost badly, but grinned the whole time. I was still me, private, stubborn, but I wasn't the drain guy anymore. I was Harlan, and that felt right. Reflecting, I saw it wasn't my fight, that one. It was the water, the footage, the neighbors who chose truth over comfort. Olivia thought she could rule the land, but land doesn't kneel. My dad's words echoed, water's patient. It was, and I learned to be, too. The trench wasn't just a drain. It was proof that systems, built with care, outlast chaos. The rains came, the trench held, and the neighborhood grew, its wounds healing like soil after a storm. That's the blocked stream, a tale of nature's revenge. I hope you felt the mud, the anger, the hope in this journey. Thanks for joining me, for rooting for a trench and a community that found its way. Keep your drains open, your truths clear, and your patience deep. Nature's got your back.